Hello, today is Friday, April 12th, 2019. I'm Joe Schmidt with TC2, and this is Staying Connected. I'm joined today by my two colleagues, David Lee and Brent Knight, and we are going to cover a pretty interesting topic, especially if you've been tasked with buying access for a site where fiber or copper is, well, shall we say, limited. Okay, David, what is the option?
Thanks, Joe. In a word, wireless. We're going to take today a quick tour of modern wireless terrestrial and satellite solutions because these solutions have fairly recently become an efficient complement to fiber when deploying carrier Ethernet services in access networks.
So, Brent, when buying this type of solution, it probably isn't in the wheelhouse of many IT professionals. So why don't you tell us how these service providers charge for the services that David just highlighted?
Sure, Joe. In the past, with older line-of-sight solutions, enterprises expected to see a big one-time charge for the equipment and the labor due to it being a customized solution. However, today, given the new technologies are more standardized, the charging methodology is more similar to a terrestrial local access charging design. Suppliers will charge a monthly recurring charge and a non-recurring charge, with the non-recurring charge to cover the installation labor as well as the equipment and any small materials that are required. Let me mention a couple of areas where you may see some additional cost, though. One, if the location has line-of-sight obstructions, then you may need to install a higher pole in order to get the required line of sight. A second area where you may see additional cost is for lack of power accessible to the equipment. In this case, rewiring may be required in order to get the proper amount of juice flowing to that equipment.
And where does it make sense to deploy these types of solutions?
The most common scenario where we see this solution implemented is where the local access diversity is required at a customer site, and that site only has a single ISP providing a LAN-based connection into the building. This is especially common with hard-to-reach or more remote sites. To run a second connection to these sites is usually very cost-prohibitive. We also see the solution in urban areas where the last-mile access into a building has only a single conduit running into it. It may have multiple providers running through that same conduit, but if the single conduit gets cut, then all the providers can be impacted.
Wow, that's really interesting. Are there other financial issues to consider, like cost variability at a site?
Sure. The answer is really twofold, Joe. One, is the solution standard or is every site a customized sizing and deployment? And two, what are the other risk factors that could impact the final cost to implement? For the first one, we do see variability with the monthly recurring charges. However, they're not typically wide ranges. I'd say they're well within the similar ranges that we see on land-based access. And the non-recurring charges are fairly standard as well. Regarding other risk factors, the most common issue we see is with landlords and permitting. If a customer doesn't own the facility, then the landlord may place stipulations on where the microwave can be installed.
So, David, how does this new alternative wireless technology compare with traditional terrestrial solutions that are handing off an Ethernet loop?
Well, Joe, the terrestrial wireless last mile uses microwave links that use a small wavelength, allowing conveniently sized antennas to direct the RF signal in a narrow beam, and that narrow beam can be pointed directly at the receiving antenna. Another advantage is that the high frequency of the microwave band provides a very large information carrying capacity so that these terrestrial wireless last miles can accommodate 100 meg up to 1 gig and even actually beyond that in special cases. So it accommodates the needs for modern enterprises and applications. In addition, terrestrial wireless is enabled by software-defined radio or SDR technology. Now, this technology has been around for a while, actually, but it's gotten cheaper and more available over several years. The SDR technology combined with the new antenna solutions offers essentially an adaptive channel solution that mitigates the typical channel performance issues such as rain fading, distance, multipath, and co-channel interference that you hear about when people talk about, well, either satellite or microwave terrestrial solutions. And with this new software-defined technology, they're using adaptive modulation, coding, and power control to essentially improve the quality of the wireless channel. So these techniques maintain the quality of the wireless channel equivalent to a fiber Ethernet solution without the issue of cable cuts or access grooming.
How does that service get installed?
Well, the overarching internet aggregator or facilities-based carrier subcontracts this out. The providers use local PTTs or specialized competitive access providers to install this. In addition, as the technology and solutions have matured, there are now niche providers to deliver this solution in various regions of the world. They have these providers, and these providers have consistent process solutions and expertise that it's very repeatable across that particular region or the globe. And so they've really enabled this. In addition to the technology that I just mentioned, they really enabled this solution.
So, David, what are your thoughts on 4G LTE or 5G when it's available as an alternative wireless local access?
Joe, great question. As we know, 5G promises significant bandwidth improvements. And where available, 4G LTE and 5G can be a great solution where there is no last mile access or where you're concerned about a cut with a backhoe or cut risers in a high-rise building. But like everything, there are issues that need to be addressed. For example, for 5G, when the wireless provider uses the millimeter wave microwave spectrum as part of their solution, they will be challenged with signal quality due to lack of the millimeter wave signal to penetrate buildings. This is well known and documented in peer-reviewed journals. This will occur even with massive MIMO type of antennas. By that, I mean hundreds of transmit and receive antennas to support dozens of end-user devices and the use of beam-forming phased array antenna technology. So the typical challenge occurs in 5G with moving users, such as when they turn a corner in Manhattan where the signal is impaired dramatically due to buildings or other structures blocking that beam. But for the fixed site, the location is fixed in relation to the antenna beam, so the radio signal and antennas can be optimized to maintain a strong connection. In short, I believe 5G will have a strong use case for the last mile access where, of course, it is available.
So the three of us have been in this business for a long time, and satellite was once the go-to wireless alternative access technology prior to 3G and 4G. But David, has it changed much?
Yes, it has. Even as today in an article in the Wall Street Journal and recent announcements, the big difference is that the low latency due to very low orbits, meaning an orbit just above or below the International Space Station altitude, as well as intersatellite crosslinks. These technologies versus a traditional 22,000-mile geostationary orbit for a communication satellite. When you think about satellites in the past, you think high latency and low bandwidth. Well, with these low Earth orbit or LEO satellites and the intersatellite crosslinks, for even large distances, say between Asia-Pac and North America, the latency can be even less compared to a terrestrial solution. And this is pretty incredible, given the past history and perception of satellite and VSAT technology. In addition, these LEO satellites are much smaller and less costly, with an average price of $500,000 versus a traditional geostationary communication satellite costing 100 times more. In addition, given their small weight, you can launch 20 or 40 of these in a given satellite launch versus one or two. So the cost to launch is much, much lower. Just last week, for example, Amazon announced their Project Kuiper with a planned constellation of 3,200 satellites, according to federal filings, and Elon Musk has plans to deploy their SpaceX's Starlink satellite constellation with 4,200 satellites. Elon Musk's organization already launched 2 test satellites. SoftBank and Virgin Group have teamed up together to launch their OneWeb LEO constellation. They've already launched 6 satellites with plans to provide a full global commercial broadband coverage in just 2 years from now. So these LEO satellite systems plan to provide broadband, if you're curious about the speed, because that's usually the problem when you talk satellite, but they're planning to have speeds at 20 meg to 50 meg speeds for extremely hard to reach locations at an affordable price point. So as an example, the mining, agribusiness, and transportation industries can take advantage of these new satellite solutions when they get deployed.
Brent, it sounds like these satellite solutions might really shake up the market. But at a high level, how do these LEO satellite service providers charge their customers?
Joe, the LEO satellite providers are pricing their services more like traditional wireless carriers. One that's based on a pre-selected monthly data capacity, and if you exceed that capacity, then you'll pay additional charges. For instance, customers can get a 50 meg plan for X dollars per month, and if you exceed the 50 megs, then you'll pay additional charges. For the equipment costs, customers can do a lease on a monthly basis, or they can purchase the equipment as a one-time charge.
Okay, guys, I think you've provided a lot of great information on today's podcast, and I think we've provided a lot of really useful information regarding alternative wireless access solutions. Before we go, though, let me just plug the half-day conference that TC2 and LB3 will be running in Atlanta on May 14th. At that conference, we'll be sharing our knowledge and experience to help you deliver innovation and cost savings to your company through network service deals. So if you'd like to learn more about that conference or this topic that we covered today, alternative wireless access solutions, or if you just have other ICT lifecycle needs, you can contact Brent, David, me, or any of our LB3 and TC2 colleagues by giving us a call or sending us an email. You can also stay current by checking out our websites, or please follow us on LinkedIn.